Hello everyone, it's Callum Parks here, and today I'm going to be talking about the separation between church and state. Well, let's just kind of dive into things here. The separation of church and state is arguably one of the most important things ever written in our Constitution. So, how did these two things discreetly join arms over the years? And is this something we, as citizens, should be afraid of? Well, let's just kind of dive into the thesis here. Religion and government must be separate. Otherwise, the country will begin to show an obvious bias towards those who don't identify with the government's religion. There is also potential for the government to no longer serve its people's needs because it is instead too focused on the religion it believes in. Now, when looking at the US currency, you will see that it says, "In God we trust." Right here, have a dollar bill for you. So when did this happen? And if the Constitution mandates a separation between church and state, how did this happen? Well, until 1956, let me make sure it's on. Yes, the national motto was E pluribus unum. You have to excuse my Latin here. But essentially what that means is out of many, one, which I find is a great motto for the US, as it discusses how the country is made up of many different people with different ideas, ideals, religions, you name it. So, this has been on the Greatest Seal, or the Great Seal of the United States since 1776. Yet in 1956, Congress decided to change it to "In God We Trust," which was approved by President Eisenhower. So why change the motto? This motto was seen as early as the 1860s, as famous Reverend Mark Watkinson petitioned to the Treasury Department to add a statement recognizing the Almighty God in some form on our currency. He wanted this to be done in order to relieve some of the mass heathenism that was being seen around the time. Now, heathenism is essentially the idea of non-belief in any god, or just a non-pagan god. Obviously, that goes against his beliefs because he's a reverend. And so he wrote that letter to the treasurer, and the treasurer then decided that he agreed with him and that he will start minting coins with some form of god on it. This motto was first seen on currency in the mid-1860s, as many people believed it to be a necessity. There was also backlash, however, we'll get to that. This motto has also been seen in the Pledge of Allegiance, the Star-Spangled Banner, and in many writings from the War of 1812. Now let's look at the importance of the motto. During the Cold War era, the US government needed to distinguish itself from the Soviet Union, which was promoting a government separated from religion, known as state atheism. That's what we're supposed to be doing. However, in doing so, the US government then decided to take that term, "In God We Trust," and coined it as the national motto. And now, through doing that, they believe that those in the US would then see another reason as to why capitalism is better than communism. This motto has been in place since then, and has been a reason of outrage for certain groups. Many believe it is a direct infringement of the Constitution's First Amendment, which I would agree with. As we now know a brief history of why the national motto was changed, we must now look at the problems of having a government with a religious bias. Now, a national motto involving any religion can turn into a quite dangerous thing. Let's look into how and why this motto can lead to polarization and an ill-led government. By holding this national motto, although possibly unintentional, the government now holds Christianity on a pedestal compared to other religions here in the US. As a country that was founded on the basis of different ideas, ideals, and different people, we must ask why the government picked Christianity above all other religions, or even any religion at all. Think about immigrating to the US as a non-Christian. How intimidating could this motto be? Think of the polarization it causes. Although the government still allows freedom of religion, as the Constitution mandates, people in the US still hold heavy biases towards Muslims and even Jews. It polarizes the people into two groups: those who believe Christianity is the end-all be-all religion, and those who believe they just wish to worship whichever religion they choose in peace. This national motto also encourages groups like the Ku Klux Klan to believe the government is supportive of their disgusting beliefs. Church and state are no longer separate in the modern-day United States. God's name can be seen on state property and is even found on flags outside of courthouses. Think of the problems this can cause when someone is up to trial who isn't a Christian. They may believe they aren't given a fair trial from the beginning. In order to make the United States a more inclusive place, we must abolish the use of religious sayings on all state-funded properties as well as currency. Now that we understand all of the problems and dangers that can come with a lack of separation between church and state, let's kind of look into what the government would be like, or how life in the U.S. would be without a religious government. If Christianity was no longer held on a pedestal by the government, religious groups would no longer be pitted against each other as to which one was the correct group. Instead, they would respect each other and become less polarized. Groups like the KKK would no longer have the excuse that they are following, the religion our government supports, and people overall would be more satisfied with the government's decisions. Now, looking at these government decisions, let's kind of analyze how things would run smoothly. Without religion, our government would no longer have to play along with the ill-placed morals that come with religion. Abortion would no longer be a religious issue backed by a Christian government. Same-sex marriage would have never been an issue in the first place, since the main opposition for such a topic is Christianity. Controversial topics that politicians love to stand on a hill for would be less controversial due to the separation of church and state. As well as controversial topics becoming less of an issue, bills would become passed with a higher efficiency because senators and the like would have less to argue about, since religion could no longer be seen as a legitimate reason to do or not to do something. Now, as we transition to the conclusion, let's look at all the terrible things that religion has caused in the past. Genocides, crusades, violence. Brings the question, why would we want our government supporting any of this in the first place? The answer is, we don't. And, we really don't. Church and state must be separated so these issues don't continue. Religion has a place. It's just far, far away from where the government is. As we move forward now that we understand why these two should be separate, start thinking of all the places you see God's name mixed in with our government. And ask yourself the question, is this really what we want? Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to slide over here and show you guys some of my, please be on the big, yes, just some of the sources here. I've got treasury.gov. I use that for things like the information on the money and and the information as to why In God We Trust was on the dollar bill. I use archives.gov just like a full explanation of the Constitution. It also just had the full Constitution on the website itself. And I use au.org. That was just kind of an interesting website with kind of your rights and with this whole separation between church and state. It mostly discussed your rights in school, like whether or not you legally have to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance, things like that. That au.org was more just kind of like a random facts, just something I could use as an example. But again, that's all for me. Thank you so much.